Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all and welcome to the inaugural Zayed Sustainability Prize Forum. My name is Umar Batli and I will be your Master of Ceremonies for today. I am delighted to be with you all here for the 15th anniversary of the Zayed Sustainability Prize, created to honor the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan's legacy of humanitarianism and sustainable development. Since 2008, the lives of over 378 million people from across the world have been positively impacted by the sustainable actions, by the sustainable solutions of the past 96 prize award winners. Truly a remarkable achievement. And this year's forum is carrying on that spirit under the theme of raising ambition, progressing inclusivity. We are joined today by a remarkable lineup of passionate and experienced speakers in the sustainability space, all committed to playing a role in delivering an inclusive climate action and bringing us closer to a truly sustainable future. And now, on that note, I'm delighted to welcome CNN anchor Eleni Giakis, who will moderate a fireside conversation with environmental activist and actor Adrian Grenier. Eleni, Adrian, the stage is yours.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Please take a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to join you today. A lot to get through, a lot of interesting conversations to have throughout the day, and I'm glad we're starting with you, Adrian. I'm sure it's a question you get often, and I think we should start because this is an intimate setting, and I'm sure you get this a lot, from actor to activist. And I don't want to just talk about sort of the logistics of this. I want to talk about what happened internally with you, that you're now living your true purpose. What was the dialogue, the internal dialogue?
Yeah, so I question this, whether I was from actor to activist. I feel like fundamentally I was always an environmentalist. I always cared about the earth, and that comes from my mother. She raised me to really take notice and appreciate the land and our relationship to the land. So really it was just a process of me becoming more myself. And I think that's what we're all doing as a society. We are realizing our inherent connection to the land, and it's not so much an either or, it's more of a yes and. Can we still have the society, the quality of life that we've all become used to, while also going back to the earth, to our true nature?
And it's actually such a beautiful idea that it's all inherent within us. It's that how do we truly live that and integrate this into our lives? You're a successful actor, you know, you've achieved so much on the global stage. Do you feel that that was in a way a launch pad to make your voice heard within the sustainability space?
Yeah, you know, I feel so privileged to have a platform to be able to communicate what's in my heart. And, the stage, the film communications keeps calling me back. I keep being asked to speak and to communicate and to tell films and tell stories. And I have that in spades. That's the easy part for me. The hard part is to create that balance where I can go back to home and go back to the earth and be like literally just an everyday human being living life. And that's why I actually ended up moving to a farm in Texas. And that was my way of saying I need to also find that connection. Instead of it just being rhetoric and talk and storytelling, which is very important, we also have to walk the walk. We have to be on the earth, 2 feet on the ground.
And that's fascinating. What have you learned about getting into farming and agriculture, working with the land? Because once you plug into what it means to produce, and understanding how yields work, and understanding irrigation issues, understanding fertilizer, understanding pests, understanding, rain, and how that influences food security. It must have been illuminating.
Well, it's illuminating and extremely humbling.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an apprentice. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I'm learning every day, and I'm finding a newfound appreciation for those who create our food, for those who have the skill and the passion and the commitment to continue to face ever-growing challenges in the environment and with agriculture. Before, when I was an environmentalist, it was all in my head. It was all ideas. It was all, abstract in many ways. And I didn't truly appreciate farmers and people who are growing our food. Now, every day, I have like a deep, deep, deep appreciation for why they do what they do. And that's really been my mission as of late, the past couple of years, is can I get closer to those farmers? Can I really speak to them and work with them so that I know what their challenges are, and I can respect that sometimes our need to move into a climate neutral world doesn't necessarily work with the realities on the ground on the farm. So we need that balance. We can't be too idealistic too quick. We have to also deal with what's in front of us and show a lot of respect and deference often to the farmers and listen to what they're telling us.
And you're so right. There needs to be a dose of pragmatism
Totally,
when,
yes.
when we are
100%.
tackling these issues. I want to quote you, if I may, something you said at an event. Our instinct in the colonial mentality has been to impose our will on and control nature as opposed to working with it. Could you extrapolate on that a little bit more for me?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we are emergent beings from nature. We are nature. We are not separate from. And at one point in our evolution of consciousness and awareness, we separated ourselves. And there's this colonial mentality that we can control nature and that we can control the world. But really, we have to be in harmony with it. We have to work with it and recognize. And so what I do is part of my process now is to listen. Just take a moment and just witness and listen to the earth and see what it's telling me, because there's a design wisdom in nature. If we listen to nature and how nature works, nature naturally breeds resilience. If you just leave it to its own device, it will create more stability and resilience. So instead of right away coming into a situation and imposing our will onto it, we can listen and take notes. In permaculture, the first principle of permaculture is to observe and interact, which means don't do anything. Just see the flows of nature, see how nature is interacting in that particular space, so that when you start to design into it, you're actually honoring and respecting the natural way the earth is designed.
I want to talk about all the various companies you've been involved with, ones that you've started, ones that you've invested in. There are quite a few. Shift was quite interesting, right?
Yes.
With bamboo bicycles and chairs made out of magazines, and then you've got your investing side of things. I want you to take me through your portfolio.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so we created the first sustainable marketplace like 12 plus years ago. And it was really a platform for sustainable lifestyle content and products. So we really believed that, market-based solutions, we need to infuse the capital into a sustainable lifestyle. Yeah. So that was a long time ago, and now that's moved into DuContra Ventures, which is my impact fund. And at DuContra, we believe in two metrics for success. One is ROI, of course, so making money. And then the second is YBM, which are the yields beyond money. So that the ineffable value that we can derive from doing business that is heart-centered and nature-aligned. And through DuContra, we invest in 4 verticals: human flourishing, future of finance, do consumer, and communitas. So we believe that better humans make a better world. So can we invest in the individual? Can we give them the tools to be the best that they can be? Health and wellness, mental health, just really supporting the individual to be the best that they can be, and then give them the tools to build the world. So money is the tool. It's what we use to create the world. So tools of finance, of equity, and access, so that we can hand that individual the tool to go build it. And then communitas is how do we bring them together with others? Because the one thing that makes humans unique is not that we're in competition. The thing that makes us unique is that we can collaborate and that we can work together. So if we can bring people together and give them the tools and support the individual, then they're going to go out and build the world from a higher place of understanding.
Could you give me examples of the kinds of projects, people that you've been investing in through Du Contra?
Oh, yeah. So we have a number of incredible companies. So there's Blue Land is one of my favorites, which is a home cleaning product company. And it's basically zero waste. So there's no plastic. And they send you a compressed caplet. So it's not water, so they're not shipping water around. And you basically take the compressed caplet, and then at home you add water to actually reconstitute it. Yeah. So it's less carbon footprint when they ship it. It's zero plastic, and it's non-toxic. So that's an incredible company.
I mean, do you get a lot of people knocking on your door with great ideas? Do you feel that there is a shift and a sea change in the way that the new generation of entrepreneurs are thinking and wanting to plug into the climate agenda?
Well, I think that there's a shift in culture in which people no longer believe that they just have to work to make a living. People know that they can make a choice to work on projects that are aligned with their values. Yeah. Not only are consumers demanding it, but we're giving ourselves permission to do the things that we believe in, that are not just simply financial in nature, but are aligned with our true vision of a more beautiful world.
I mean, when you were explaining sort of the metrics and, the thinking behind the strategy, behind the kind of companies you want to invest in, it kind of brings me to think deeply about what traditional financing thinks about risk, the way that they define risk, the way they calculate it, the way they calculate yields and margins about what they're expecting in terms of return.
Yep.
Do you feel you're making an impact in the way that traditional financing has been structured?
Yeah, well, we have metrics to sort of track our financial return, but one thing that's hard to track is impact.
Yeah.
Right? That's why actually right here we have Producers Market here, one of the companies that we support, and that's what they do. They're actually creating a tangible system of tracking the impact of these different projects so that when investors and governments come in, they can actually see on a dashboard all of the impact that they're having on the ground. Because what we ultimately want is we want that felt experience of return on that impact. It's not just this abstract idea, it's tangible. You can see it, you can track it. So it's carbon sequestration, say that 10 times real fast. It's workers and supporting their well-being, the health and wellness of the workers. So how do you take all of these different metrics, boil it down into a way that people can digest it and feel confident that they're not just putting money in an abstract idea, but it's actually getting to the people, and it's actually having a positive effect on the planet.
I'm glad you've got your team here that came up with those metrics, because a lot of the banks that I speak to, and they say, well, how do you measure your impact? And there isn't sort of a standardized, piece of paper that says, listen, this is what the world thinks of impact. You've got to sort of make it up as you go along, right? And you've got to think about your own values and what that means. Since we're talking about numbers, and I have to tell you, I'm a numbers person.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
What are the kind of yields that you do expect when you're investing? I mean, do you guys have like a specific number that you're after, or is the impact more important to you? Because you've got to think about sustainability in your business.
100%. Is it okay that I say I'm not a numbers guy? I'm the storytelling guy. I'm the dreamer. I'm the communicator. For me, it's about the human faces. Like what really, what I judge is when I can look at somebody in the eyes and I can get on the ground and I can really connect with the people who are making a difference. And that's why we have the numbers people. That's why we have you, so you could tell us. But my team, what they look at, and we hire for this, actually. We hire for people who are smart with numbers, and they can do all the spreadsheets and the calculations for the financial return. Because, of course, we need to make money so that we can continue and we can grow. But we also we also hire for another metric, which is EQ. There's IQ and then there's EQ. There's that, are they sensitive? Can they look at a founder and really understand them as a human being and know that they mean what they say, right? And that's a judgment call. In many ways, that's something that you just have to have a feel for, that you trust this person is going to commit to their mission to make the world a better place, and they're not just looking to exploit a market that is often ambiguous. You know, a lot of actors out there that want to just make a quick buck off of our goodwill. Yeah. And so that's just, on many ways, it's a judgment call.
Your Earth Speed series,
yes.
Really fascinating. You focus a bit on financial literacy as well, and I think, you know, sort of the new generation that has these amazing ideas that could really make an impact, and ideas that can be scaled, often don't really know how to go around this and about that. Could you, you know, what are you thinking within financial literacy space, and how are you guys trying to tackle the issue?
Yeah, well, so Earth Speed is a series, and I invite you all to have a look, tracking my experience essentially becoming a farmer. But at the same time, I interview thought leaders and business leaders in the impact space, right? So it's where investment and impact investing meets actual application. So it's aspiration and application. Yeah. And I look at it as a lifestyle in the cadence of nature. So how do we get into the rhythm of the earth? How do we start to align ourselves with what nature is speaking to us and telling us it needs, and bringing those investments into alignment with that spirit? But absolutely, so Future of Finance is our vertical around financial literacy, equity access, so instruments and tools that give individuals an opportunity to understand how money works in their business and how they can best use it for impact. And the way we see it, you know, our saying is, money is a tool, as I mentioned, and the spirit of the tool is determined by the hand of the user, right? So money is one thing, but if you don't know how to use it, and if you don't use it in a positive way, a hammer can be used to break something, or it could be used to build something. So we really emphasize how somebody is actually going to take that investment and use it in the right way.
Really fascinating. You know, as you were speaking, I was wondering, you know, you've evolved so much, and, you know, from having a sustainable marketplace to where you are now in impact investing. What was the most challenging thing that you experienced through this evolution?
The most challenging thing is, I tell you, it's not, you know, getting on set and learning my lines. It's not that. It's not investing. It's really when I look out at an acre of land, a hectare of earth, and I have to grow something, and I feel utterly inept, incapable. I don't know if I can do it. And I have to wake up every day, and I have to get out there and make sure the plants are watered, but not too much, just enough, and that they have the right fertilizer and the right sun. And then you go to sleep, and you don't know if that night a bunch of deer are going to come in and eat your crop. So for me, the hardest thing is to come back into resonance with nature and understand that I'm not in control of it, but I can dance with it and I can move with it. It's really about the hardest thing is to be in that space of not knowing and uncertainty, and still have the confidence to get up and do it again and again and again.
You know, this disconnect with the world I really resonate with. I grew up in South Africa. My parents are from rural Greece. And one of the things that my parents taught me from a young age was to understand how to grow things. And one thing I've learned since I've come to Dubai, that I've had to understand a completely different terrain. Thank goodness there are no aphids here. I have not come across aphids. Aphids are the bane of my life, growing vegetables. But I feel that we've been so disconnected. I'm one of the few in my environment that really understands how to grow things. And why? I don't get it.
Good for you. I'm happy for you to have that upbringing. I grew up in New York City, and I didn't know.
I had to water a plant, right? Too much, too little.
There was no nature. There was only concrete. And to me, it's all about trade-offs, right? I mean, there's no aphids, right, but there might be other challenges. So that's why it's so important to take a moment to see what the environment is telling you and work with it.
Single-use plastics. I think at some point you realize what your plastic footprint is. And because I'm someone that looks at value chains, I understand that it obviously goes back to the oil industry. This is probably one of the biggest conversations that needs to be had, in addition to dropping global temperatures. What are your thoughts on this and how it needs to be tackled?
Plastic?
Yeah.
Well, I have a very measured approach to the environment. I'm a realist, ultimately.
Yeah.
I do have big ideas, and I have ideals that I'd like to hit. But at the end of the day, I have a deep compassion and an appreciation for how the world works and how business works. And plastic is such a useful, it's a useful material. I mean, there's just no way around it. So I'm not naive enough to think we should just do away with plastic. For me, it's all about how do we manage this very useful material and keep it out of the environment and keep it in the economy. So one thing that we've done at my nonprofit Lonely Whale, which is an ocean organization, and our primary goal is to keep plastic out of the ocean. And what we've done is we've created a supply chain called Next Wave. And this supply chain is a consortium of 15 or so and growing companies that have an international footprint. So they all have plastic that they need to use in their business. And we've brought them in, and we've got them to sign commitments to do an internal audit of their business and find use cases for a particular material that we call OBP, which is ocean-bound plastic. This is mismanaged plastic waste that is along the shorelines, in the riverbeds, that are on its way out into the ocean. And they have committed to buy a certain number of this material, recognizing that it has value and that if we could create the supply chain, then we can take that investment and start paying waste pickers in countries that have a lot of mismanaged waste, don't have the infrastructure, so that we can actually build that economy on site so that they can prevent the plastic from going into the ocean in the first place. So it's mitigation at the source. Instead of waiting for it to get into the ocean and spending a whole lot of money to go out there and try and retrieve it, let's just keep it from going in the first place. And these companies have agreed to buy the plastic so that they can put it in their business. So we keep it out of the ocean and put it back in the economy.
And again, a very practical approach, right? So you're looking at recycling as opposed to saying, do away with plastic completely.
Yeah, it's not the most fun part of the game. It's infrastructure, right? It's a supply chain. A lot of environmentalists, they want to do the fancy taglines and be seen with, Al Gore. That's cool and all, but ultimately, it's going to come down to, can we build the infrastructure of business so that we can prevent some of these really just inefficiencies?
I want to talk about COP. COP27, I was in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt. There was a huge shift in terms of loss and damage. I think vulnerable countries have really been very vocal about the fact that they want to see a lot more investing in projects within their countries. And then, the whole notion of risk, which we touched on earlier, comes up. Banks say we need to de-risk. It's too risky. How do you watch these conversations? Do you have thoughts on COP? What do you say, well, a lot more needs to be done? How do you feel?
Well, first of all, I may not leave. I may just wait here until COP because I've been really enjoying my visit here, and I hope to come back for sure for COP28 here. But I think it's twofold. It's one, I think it's so important that world leaders come together, business leaders, and start to row in the same direction. They start to speak in the same direction. We start to go towards our North Star of carbon neutral, better environment, plastic free, all of these things. And that's amazing to sign treaties and to really make declarations on a global stage. Super important. But really what gets me excited is what's on the ground, the human face to actually putting these ideas into practice. So I hope this year at COP we really can bring that felt return on impact. How do we see the people who are making a difference, the farmers out there? Can we get some of them to be part of the conversation?
Because you're thinking small scale as well. You're not just thinking these big projects, right, that require major funding, because those are great, but you also have to look at the small guys.
It's both. Like I believe in oscillation therapy.
Yeah.
You know, you got to get big and think of the world, and you have to understand the global problems and the challenges, and then you got to get small and actionable. You know, when I was thinking about the plastic problem, we have 10 million tons of plastic that makes its way into the ocean every year. So when you think about 10 million tons, how do we solve it? It's so big that you end up becoming overwhelmed, and then you just turn off. It's too much for one human to do anything. But if you can find a single unit of plastic and put it in the right place or put it back in the economy, then you start to make a difference. So I think you need both. You need to have that balance between the macro and the micro.
There's been incredible shifts here in the UAE and frankly in the region as well, oil producers really wanting to diversify their economies, especially internally in terms of energy production. We have learned through what we're seeing in Europe that energy security is vital, right?
Yep.
And because I've visited so many countries on the continent, you can't tell someone not to cook with fossil fuel because they need to feed their children. So there's a balance that we need to take into cognizance. But there's been an amazing shift here in the UAE. What are your thoughts on how it's changing?
I totally agree. We need cheap, available energy. We're growing, especially in developing worlds. They want to grow, and they deserve to have access to energy so that they can get to a standard of living that we're all appreciative of. And at the same time, we can start bringing in new technologies, renewables, as what I see as a complement to our existing energy infrastructure. I'm a realist. You know, I don't believe in just all of a sudden switching over to renewables because they're still early stages. So there's a lot of development that needs to get done. But what I see is so many investments going into renewables that they're getting better and better and better. And I see right here in Abu Dhabi like a standard of investment and support to actually bring online a renewable energy infrastructure that can actually start to complement in a really powerful way.
Absolutely. I mean, it's incredible to just see the shifts living here. Okay, there's a few questions that I always ask CEOs or executives or actors now. What keeps you up at night? What is the thing that worries you the most?
I try not to stay up because, you know, it's important to get a good night's sleep because we have a lifetime of work to do. And if you burn out, if we as environmentalists, as leaders, don't get a good night's rest, and if we are not thinking clearly, we're going to make mistakes. So I believe we don't want to be so urgent that we make the wrong moves. So we want to be deliberate and mindful. Yeah. And so I try not to stay up at night. I try and get a good night's sleep so that I can be healthy, well-rested, so I can get out and have a lifetime commitment to this work, and that I don't stop because I need to take care of myself down the road.
It's great advice. I need to take that advice. I'm always up at night. The year ahead, the next few years, are you feeling optimistic about where we're headed? I think with COVID, we learned so many lessons, right? We learned so much. And now the geopolitical world has created so much flux in so many people's lives. We're feeling it everywhere, whether it's through inflation, low economic growth, higher oil prices. Does this kind of stuff, these macro issues, worry you about the future?
No, I am an optimist, absolutely. In the same breath, I'd say get a good night's rest. I'd also say don't watch so much news. Don't turn off your Instagram and your social media because there's a lot of misinformation. And I'm not saying that from like the political. I'm just saying that if you're not experiencing it and witnessing it in your life, You don't necessarily have to take on the world's problems. A lot of times people, because they have so much access to information, they feel like they have to be a part of the global conversation at all times. So they end up amplifying their voice and doing crazier and crazier things to get attention or to be part of the conversation. It's an outrage culture. Sometimes you have to just act extremely locally. And if you look around you, there are good people. There's a lot of things to be hopeful for. Clean your room. Take care of yourself first before you go out into the world and start telling everybody else how to be. So I try to find balance in how much I take in from the world out at large. We have leaders to do that, and I'm a leader in my community. I'm a leader in my home, first and foremost.
That is amazing advice, and we'll try and take that, although I'm plugged into the news always. Adrian Grenier, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're incredible. I appreciate your honest and open insights. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ladies and
Thanks,
gentlemen.
everyone.
Adrian Grenier.
Hey, man. Cheers.
Thank you once again to Eleni and, of course, to Adrian. What a wonderful way to kick off our morning, hearing, of course, all those, I think, positive, passionate arguments and thoughts on infusing capital and sustainable lifestyles, investing in yourself and the individual, all lessons I think we can all take on, and I will be hearing more about some of these ideas as we move throughout today's sessions. So moving swiftly on to our next topic of the day, shaping sustainable communities. Let's take a look.
A 2022 UN World Food Programme report warned that there will be at least 1.9 billion people suffering from poverty, famine, and starvation by 2023. How can we lift vulnerable communities out of poverty and improve social cohesion? Communities with access to affordable and reliable energy, nutritious food, safe drinking water, and quality healthcare are more resilient and connected. Inclusive climate action and sustainable solutions help communities thrive.
I'd now like to welcome to the stage Reuters journalist Jim Stenman, who will be moderating today's first panel. And joining Jim on are today's panelists, Satya Tripathi, Secretary General, Global Alliance for the Planet, Taler Rumhi, Director, Reaching Last Mile, and Christina Skirka, CEO of Power for All. Please join me in giving them a warm welcome to the stage. And over to you, Jim.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for having us. So this session, as mentioned, is called Shaping Sustainable Communities, and it's all about exploring some of the life-changing benefits of scaling sustainable solutions in last-mile communities. So these are communities that are often isolated to some extent from the rest of the world and that sometimes lack basic infrastructure, such as electricity, but also other similar elements. And I'm very pleased to have a great panel with me here today. So we have Satya Tripathi, Secretary General of Global Alliance, Sustainable Planet. We also have Tala Al-Romahi, a director with the Crown Prince's Court here in Abu Dhabi, and Christina Skierka, I believe, CEO of Power for All. Thank you very much for joining me today. So I'd like to start with you, Satya. You have over 40 years, so 4 decades of experience in sustainable development. What do you think is the most unifying factor that you've come across when it comes to bringing real-life, tangible results to some of the communities that you're working with?
Well, I'm an optimist and an incorrigible one at that. I believe that we have within us, as the human race, to actually prevent the worst impacts of climate change. And I'll explain how. 6 years ago, we started supporting a program that was run in Andhra Pradesh, state of India. a program where women farmers are actually turning to natural farming. It's not organic farming. There's a very subtle difference. Organic farming is compost-based. Natural farming is a process of bioinoculation. So it's ultra low cost, where the costs drop by about 80%, and the yields have gone up anywhere between 28 to 200%. And they're about 1 million strong now. The world's largest agroecology-based farming program. We call it restorative agriculture. Agriculture that heals, agriculture that regenerates ecosystems, agriculture that fixes the public economy of people at the bottom of the pyramid, and agriculture that actually brings back public health with a vengeance in a good way. You know, moving away from the pharmacy industrial complex, you know, is what we have now, where you feed yourself with agrochemicals and pesticides, and then you run to the hospitals every few months, breaking your entire individual economy and your piggy bank to survive if you are a poor person. So there are these solutions staring us on our face. We have to be brave, and we are in the United Arab Emirates, which has been a pillar of strength in renewable energy. You know, I was just discussing with some friends about what UAE has achieved. You know, in the last 15 years, what Masdar has achieved, and it's not talked about much, is that it has brought down, through its engagement in the developing world, solar used to sell for $25 cents 15, 16 years ago. Now it actually publicly gets auctioned at around $2 cents, beating coal and any other form of thermal energy. So that's the power of intervention, and that's why I'm so optimistic that UAE is hosting COP28, because it has both the motivation, the inclination, and the resources to actually make it a COP that matters. Because the last 27, and forgive me for saying this, I was the head of the UN's Environment Management Group, so I know what I'm talking. We have utterly failed in the last 27 versions. We come up with band-aids at the end of every COP. So this COP can actually matter because they have what it takes. Thank you.
And you talked about farming specifically, but sort of in a broader way. Is there a specific community that you've visited yourself where you've really seen the impact that you explored with us earlier?
I have been with these communities about 100 times now.
Is there one that stands out to you?
Every community, these are women farmers. They're organized along self-help groups of 10 women each, and then there are about 7 million of them, organized into 700,000 self-help groups. And actually, people talk about money not being available to do these things. The year before, a big shout out to the German Development Bank. They put 300 million euros into this program at only 0.5% interest. So when you do the right thing, and that's what people at the bottom of the pyramid are showing us, that when you do the right thing, and at scale, and this is system scale, this is not just scale. So actually, the big actors are willing to step up to the plate and put the resources where it matters. So I can talk about thousands and thousands of communities. It is an enlightening, enlivening, and empowering experience every time you visit them. You know, we often talk about risk and how do we manage risk in all these conversations, because that's how you invest. You should be able to manage your risk. And think about these poor women. Their resilience is this little, between one crop cycle to next. What they grow and make in terms of returns determines whether their children will go to school, whether they will even eat. They are willing to change by the millions. So we need to really be thankful to them for the inspiration these women are. So in every community you can, and I actually welcome all of you. Please come and see what these women are doing, and there are 1 million already.
Which obviously has an impact on gender equality as well, as women, farming and they're supporting their family. So I can see how that can affect the communities overall as well. Tala, I'd like to turn to you quickly and ask you why healthcare needs a seat at the table when it comes to building sustainable and climate resilient communities.
Thank you, Jem, for the question. Just to provide some context on reaching the last mile for those who don't know, Reaching the Last Mile represents a portfolio of global health programs funded directly by His Highness the President and focused on eliminating or at least controlling 7 diseases that are preventable and mostly prevalent in the poorest and low resource communities. The reason why this is critical is because the WHO has already stated that climate change is the biggest threat to human health. Put simply, the air we breathe, the water we drink, our access to food, but also our vulnerability to disease is directly tied to the health of our planet. And so if our planet is in crisis, so are we. And we're talking about populations or communities. When we talk about communities, these communities are driven by people who must be productive, and in order to be productive, they need to be healthy. And unfortunately, because the climate crisis has affected our own health, this becomes incredibly important to address. Just to throw out some statistics, and this should not be a surprise to many people in the audience, but climate change and extreme weather conditions due to climate change has increased 5-fold in the last 5 decades. This is extremely frightening. It has killed over 2 million people in the last 5 decades and caused over $3 trillion in losses because of this. Worldwide, air pollution continues to cause deaths. 1 in 5 deaths are due to air pollution, and thousands of those deaths are unfortunately children who die from issues linked to respiratory concerns due to bad air quality, essentially. So I think that's why we need to have an integral part of the conversations on climate change. And I think what's important to note as well, given that the work that we do are in some of the hardest to reach communities, last mile communities, where resources are already stretched, the health systems there are already at capacity, climate change can only make these outcomes worse. And if we don't begin to address and create more sustainable solutions to addressing global health problems, the situation will only get worse from here. But we're optimistic, and I would say through Reaching the Last Mile are trying to think about innovative ways to address global health and disease control programs, which I can talk about later in this conversation.
And do you think that there's a unique role for Abu Dhabi and the UAE to play in that, given the fact that it's sort of friendly to the West, obviously, but it's become a major hub for the developing world as well?
Absolutely, and the UAE does play a critical role in this, whether it's investing in sustainable and renewable energy, but more pertinent to our portfolio is the investments that are going into supporting global health programs worldwide, not just through private philanthropic grants, but also working very closely with partners on the ground to address these issues, because what we've realized is that local problems require local solutions. And so we cannot come with a mentality that we know the answers to what local concerns are. What we'd like to bring to the table is our will to work very closely and in partnership with committed governments, but also committed local partners that can be part of the solution. One particular example I would bring in is a new pilot program that we launched with Malaria No More that is aimed at addressing and understanding how climate change affects malaria outbreaks. And the challenge with climate change is that changing weather patterns greatly affect vector-borne diseases such as malaria, such as neglected tropical diseases. And up until now, we still, for the most part, don't understand how climate change has affected the prevalence and how these disease outbreaks manifest through climate change. And so through our partnership with Malaria No More, what we're trying to do is utilize big data, weather data, Earth observation data, but also population data to create better prediction and planning tools for disease control programs. We started off with Odisha, India, and the pilot has been a great success since its launch in 2020, reducing the burden of malaria by 90% in the state of Odisha, which is instrumental for us as we scale up. What we try to do as well, just bringing it back to the conversation on how the UAE can play a role, we didn't just want to be philanthropic funders or passive philanthropic funders. We brought in the Mohammed bin Zayed University for Artificial Intelligence, who now have become a lead technical partner in this effort, to work closely with local partners to create even more accurate prediction and planning tools for this work. And that's the ethos of how we approach our work. We want to make sure that the UAE is part of the solution, and that we're not just spending money or offering money in a very passive way.
And what do you think people would find most surprising in terms of the work that the UAE is doing in this space? You said being part of the solution. Absolutely, I hear you. But what do you think the rest of the world might find surprising about the process and the results that it's yielding?
I think not enough people know about the investments and long-term investments in disease elimination around the world. I would say 90% of His Highness's portfolio in disease elimination has focused on Africa and is aimed at either eliminating or at least controlling some of the diseases I talked about. Last year, Bill Gates was in town to celebrate a big milestone for the portfolio, where we announced that Niger successfully eliminated one NTD called river blindness for the first time in Africa. This is a big feat because when people talk about disease elimination, they think this is an unreasonable goal or something that it cannot be achieved. But we've shown that through committed partnerships and committed investments from philanthropic funders, we can make big wins in the space. If I go back to how this all started, 30 years ago, our founding father, Sheikh Zayed, actually seeded the first UAE investment in neglected tropical disease elimination through a partnership with President Carter at the time, who was spearheading efforts on guinea worm eradication. Since then, the commitment is ongoing. We continue to work very closely with the Carter Center, and last year announced that there are only 15 cases of human cases of guinea worm worldwide, which is another big feat. So I think there are many successes that we can point to, and through approaching disease elimination, we're also strengthening global health systems at the same time.
Excellent. Christina, obviously there's usually talk of there being a moral imperative to providing universal energy to communities around the world, and I don't think anyone's going to argue against that, but it's also key to achieving sustainable development goals for all nations. How do you protect climate without causing energy poverty?
Thank you so much, and also congratulations to the prize. We actually at Power for All have a very special relationship to the prize. I was here 10 years ago to collect a prize when I was working with a company called D-Light, one of the early movers in rooftop solar for developing communities. And out of that work grew Power for All, which is a global campaign focused on ending energy poverty by accelerating the adoption of decentralized renewable energy. So your question is perfect, spot on, and renewables, I mean, it's a little bit of a softball, but absolutely renewables are one of the important ways of addressing development without really trying to make our situation worse when it comes to climate challenges. So in our world of energy, we focus on something called avoiding path dependency, and that means getting out of our business as usual approach to electrification. And if I could offer a friendly amendment to our prior speaker, in fact, these are not new technologies. D-Light itself has been around for over 15 years and has helped electrify the lives of 100 million people. And what's great about using these technologies technologies, and yes, we are working to displace existing fossil fuel systems, kerosene, diesel, coal, charcoal, etc. But the idea of using a market-based approach is that people own their own energy and they buy into these systems that pay back to them instead of continuing to put their money, their budgets that already exist, into these fossil fuels at a local level that keep, absolutely providing light at night. But in this case, people own the source of the power that then continues to generate. So when it comes to looking at ways of addressing the moral imperative, which is giving people the opportunity to realize their full potential, which is only possible with having access to the kind of electricity that we're using here today, the way is renewables.
Right. And is there a specific community that you can touch on as well that's benefited from this?
Yeah, there's tons of great stories from around the world. In fact, most of the countries that are energy poor, and as we define it, it's Power for All, those are countries with 50% or less of the population having access to energy. That represents a group of an enormous potential of countries to grow these markets, but in particular, we've seen incredible uptake in some of the countries already mentioned today. So whether it's India or Nigeria or Kenya, but it's hard to find a corner of the world where decentralized renewables don't exist. And what's great is it has an application for almost every single SDG. So I'm actually here for addressing SDG 7. There's a big event before this event called the ARENA General Assembly. And among the topics that we cover is the role of renewables in addressing energy poverty. But there's incredible stories that also happen on a community level. And so when we see, for example, we were talking about farmers earlier, there's a great opportunity for renewables to radically improve productivity for smallholder farmers. And that's a community of 500 million farmers around the world that all research and practical application has showed once you improve that productivity, you're improving incomes, which creates even more lifestyle and choice improvement in people's lives.
And what's the biggest shift that you've seen when it comes to the perception of renewables, not just in the developing world, but in some of these communities that may not necessarily have been exposed to it before?
It's a great question. And I was in Ethiopia a couple of months ago. We have an agricultural program we call Powering Agriculture there.
I'm half Ethiopian.
Oh, fantastic. Yes. So one of the stories there, of course, in many of the countries that are energy poor, there's also an overlap with a number of smallholder farmers. So in most countries in sub-Saharan Africa and actually throughout the continent, including Ethiopia, 50%, 60, sometimes 70% of the population makes their income through farming. So it's really important that we find ways to address improving agriculture and productivity. But in fact, we were working with the Agricultural Technology Institute there, and they had told us, and we had some focus groups we did with the farmers as well, that in fact, diesel-powered water pumps, right? So that's an important way of growing farms and growing productivity, were causing more problems than good. Incredible opening for solar power because there's plenty of solar-powered irrigation out there. We just need to get into the hands of farmers, because what was the story from the farmers in Ethiopia is that the diesel quality was falling down and down and down. It was starting to clog their pumps. So that's just one example of how that it certainly wasn't planned, I'm sure, by the diesel importers to happen. Yeah. But in fact, there's just a perfect opening of where you see an opportunity to shift because of a problem with the existing infrastructure system. And absolutely, we do have an incumbent system that has a great distribution mechanism. But beyond that, with that was the opportunity to educate farmers about access to solar pumps and showing how with financing in a short amount of time, for the same amount of money they're spending on a diesel pump, they can actually own a system that powers itself and in fact save money, make more money, and if they want, buy more pumps.
And what do they need right now in order to scale?
The solar water pump providers? Well, in many cases, political will is an issue. So one of the things we've been working on for a number of years is to try to get countries who have energy poverty issues to create energy policy that not only has an ambitious target for universal access, but also has carve-outs for that access to be delivered by decentralized means. So that means rooftop solar, that means mini grids, et cetera. So that kind of commitment is one level, but then after that, what we need are countries to make it easier for the companies to do business. And that means everything from making easier access to foreign exchange to creating an easier sort of one-stop shop approach to setting up business in these countries. But as soon as we can open for the market will grow and help in this problem of energy poverty.
So we're sitting here in a country that's been on a tremendous journey for the past 50 years. It's completely transformed. But like I mentioned before, the UAE has really emerged as a hub for the developing world, for other countries in the Middle East, Africa, increasingly. What can be done in order to support or making climate action more inclusive? Because it's quite easy to sit in the West and preach to the developing world, but how do we empower them to make the changes without sacrificing their own economic prosperity? It's a question for all of you, really. Do you want to start it?
I think by pricing carbon right. So currently what we have is carbon is anywhere between, of course the market had collapsed to 20 cents, so let's not talk about that. We're in a more realistic scenario now, about $22 a ton. Then at the other end of the spectrum, you have companies like Climeworks, Global Thermostat, Carbon Engineering and all, 1,000 euros a ton. They're selling it on their website actually, and there are tens of thousands of people buying. Call me crazy for calling it crazy, but it is what it is. So yes, you believe in technology, and by their own admission, they say that it'll get to 1 billion tons, the entire industry, not that company. That company actually reduced 3,500 tons of carbon, only 3,500 tons. You could have gone to the market and bought it for $70,000. And they raised $650 million last year for a piece of that company. How about we acknowledging and respecting the people that break their backs, these women who actually grow the food that nourishes and keeps the human race alive? How about giving them some respect? How about pricing that carbon in a way, say $100. Actually, if we get to $100 for what I call better carbon or SDG carbon, because this is not, carbon is a scientific measure, is the same. Whether you remove it, you sequester it, you mitigate it, you reduce it, it's all the same in terms of scientific value. But in terms of social, economic, and environmental value, there are multiple pathways. And the pathway these people take, you talked about malaria. Andhra Pradesh is the neighboring state to Orissa. We picked up primary health center data in 93 bio-villages in Andhra Pradesh that have been doing this for 5 years. Malaria, anemia, cancer, diarrhea, the drop in incidence of diseases is 90% because poor people, for the first time, have access to clean food. They can never go to a supermarket and buy organic food. But when they grow it themselves, what they call natural farming, they actually keep enough food for themselves before it goes to market. So you're actually transforming the entire social infrastructure, be it public health. Water conservation is 50%. We have incontrovertible evidence now because, as Christine was talking about, they use these pumps, what they call bore wells. So now we have documented electricity meters and data that tells us that they're pumping 50% less water since they started this process. So, one could go on and on. India currently spends $30 billion. Last year, they spent $30 billion on fertilizer subsidies. Another $18 billion on farm electricity subsidies. Add another $12 billion on interest subvention schemes, farm loan waivers. Come every political election cycle, every political party is falling over each other to waive all the loans, destroying the credit infrastructure, credit architecture in the country, because if I never have to pay back, I just keep taking money. There is no banking architecture left anymore. So, but if you leave that if you follow the right path, get the right price of carbon, then you'll incentivize 120 million smallholder farmers just in India. The world has 500 million. And that, with an average family size of 4, you're talking about 500 million people only in India that would have come out of poverty at the grassroots, creating prosperity where it matters, improving public health exponentially. So that's where the impact is. If we can find the right price of carbon, not just to acknowledge, not just to be grateful for what they do, but respect, because there is the modern economy, the only way you can show respect is for the market to price it right. Because then you don't have to go and convince people, hey, please change. People will change themselves because it will be economically remunerative to change behavior.
And at the end of the day, it's about building inclusive economies where everyone can thrive.
You know, and let me conclude by saying this. If you take the steel industry, if you take the IT and the IT-enabled services industry, let's take the automotive, let's take the transport sector, you know, add all of that, 50 million jobs worldwide. Just 50 million.
Yeah.
There are 1 billion people employed in agriculture. With an average family size of 4, that's 4 billion people, 50% of the world's population. We fix our food systems, we'll fix the climate problem. So let's put all our heads together and respond. Adrian talked about Producers Market. They're a partner in this program in Andhra Pradesh. I invited Keith to come and he's been a huge help. The point is that we really need to go to where the impact is, where the real people are, and whose lives will change. And as it changes, it will change and transform the world.
Excellent.
Could I just add, if I could just add, and obviously that was well received, but just to add to that as well, I think one of the things that we're fundamentally talking about here, especially with decentralized energy, is also decentralizing and democratizing power. As soon as we change the way that business as usual energy delivery happens, we change the way that this inclusive movement can happen. And I think one of the important things to remember is that the more we can make room for the market to grow, that actually means local jobs. And in fact, what we see in the renewable sector, including the decentralized sector, is women have more jobs, in fact, twice as many by percentage in the renewables industry than in the traditional fossil fuels industry. So that also means creating a pathway for young women, young men to have careers. They need to grow up. We need a renewable energy generation that sees renewables as business as usual, not traditional centralized fossil fuel-based power. So that would be my salvo. And the other thing that can be done is just, you know, we need to be considering this as infrastructure. It's not steel in the ground as we traditionally know when it's decentralized, but it is absolutely energy infrastructure, and it needs to have fair access to subsidy in order to create this opportunity.
And Tala, final word as we almost wrap up here.
That's a lot of pressure, but just bringing it back to our conversation on global health and the importance of creating local solutions to local problems. There is an urgent need to better understand the climate and health nexus. And currently, we don't have the data for it. A lot of the data that we do receive is from the global north. And to be able to do our work more effectively in the countries and communities that need it most, we need data that is inclusive, that is equitable, and is applicable to the communities that we're trying to serve. And I think more importantly as well, we need to approach this work in a way that centers the voices and experiences of the people that know their communities most. And for the work that we do, these are the frontline health workers, these are community health workers that are delivering the vast majority of primary health care to these communities. And so that continues to be an ethos that we need to pursue. And that is the only way we believe we can be successful in our efforts to reduce the burden of disease on everyone that is affected by these unfortunate and preventable diseases that continue to disable, disfigure, pull out people from productive opportunities, and really stifle their livelihoods.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. It's been inspiring to hear about the work that you guys are doing on the ground, be it in Asia, Africa, or the Middle East as well. So thank you very much, and thank you to our audience for listening as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, of course, to Jim and to all of our panelists for that great conversation, talking about sustainable communities, how to reach those last mile communities, those remote communities, supporting them in everything, whether it comes to food, health, energy, agriculture, all crucial topics, community solutions for the community itself. So definitely something I think that was really well spoken. We'll hear more about that as we move throughout today. We now swiftly move on to our next topic of discussion, one I hope that you will all engage with also, which is bridging the gap.
Less than 16% of the world's climate finance needs are being met. 2.2 million people can't access safe drinking water. 13% of people don't have electricity. 1 in 9 people are hungry. To bridge the gap, financial institutions, governments, and practitioners must work together to lift people out of poverty.
And now we'd like to welcome back to the stage Eleni Giakis, who will be joined by Swapna Gupta, partner of Vana Capital, and Jerome Ponrouche, head of company engagement, BNP Paribas. Please join me in giving them a very warm welcome to the stage. And over to you, Eleni.
Thank you so very much, Omar, and incredible discussion that Jim was just moderating, listening to all the different thoughts and ideas. Our conversation now is bridging the gap. Just a few words on this. When I think of bridging the gap, I think it basically pertains to so much. Reality versus what we hear in the boardrooms. The commitment, which is amazing, lots of zeros versus actually getting that money to work. I think realities of what people face in terms of energy insecurity, places where I come from, in Africa and in many other emerging market communities, versus the climate change agenda, creating this balance. I have 2 incredible guests with me that hopefully will be able to help me understand how they are trying to bridge the gap in their respective fields. I'm glad to have a banker on board because you're at the coalface of dealing with big corporates about what they're doing, the metrics that we said don't exist in understanding impact, and then of course the realities of dealing with entrepreneurs on the ground in India where Vana Capital is doing incredible work. Swapna, I want to start with you. I want you to give me a breakdown of what Vana Capital is doing. From my understanding, I think you're working with 20 entrepreneurs right now. Technology and sustainability are at the heart of this. I want you to tell me about your metrics and how you decide whether these companies make sense and align with your philosophy.
Absolutely. So at Avana Capital in India, we are building the most preferred capital for entrepreneurs using technology to solve for climate. Prima facie, that comes from background of all our team, which is a bunch of operators and investors who have invested in technology for decades. And one single learning is that leapfrogs are the only way to move nations forward. And most of the leapfrog happens when technology becomes part of the equation. And technologies of the past, unfortunately, cannot solve a future. And we want to create a future which is more inclusive in terms of climate friendliness. And we are moving towards all our net zero targets. Again, the second biggest learning has been that world is, of course, flat. And global north, global south, we can continue the narrative. But we all need to build for together. You can't just solve for one part of the world and assume that it's because it's the same air we breathe at the end of the day. And India is 20% of the world population. It is a big part of the equation. And someone needs to solve for climate in India. And we are leading the charge. And that charge is being actually led in the form of investing in these really ambitious entrepreneurs who are building not only atoms, but also bits to solve for climate. And what that essentially means is climate is not sectoral, right? It's very thematic. And to think about nations like ours, emerging markets, 90% of countries like our emissions are from 3 key sectors, be it supply chain or mobility, energy transition, food systems. And if you are able to solve across these 3 key areas, these also contribute to about 70 to 80% of GDP globally across each parts of the world. We are able to get towards a journey towards solving for climate sooner than later. And I think the other big realization, no offense to corporates, I used to work for one large one, everyone is sleeping at the wheel. And innovation somehow has to happen in a way where corporates and entrepreneurs work together and solve for that equation.
Jerome, are you sleeping at the wheel?
Absolutely.
This is a natural follow-up.
No, glad to represent banking and BNP Paribas better,
Yeah.
of course, on this stage. Just an observation. At BNP Paribas, we not only deal with companies and boardrooms, but we deal with individuals and non-profit organizations among our clientele, our chosen clientele. May I address this point of view
Yes,
towards
please.
innovation? It is true that the banking system has gone through a tremendous transformation in the past 15 years, accelerated after the global financial crisis of 2008, obviously. But you know, if you take the motto of this organization that I worked for 30 years and for good reasons, the bank of a changing world, one of the outcomes which is happening today is our ability to deploy resources. And resources at banks are made of humans, experts, people with brains and understand and adapt and execute, make a difference to the economy and society, and capital. The ability to deploy capital to what is needed has never been higher. And therefore, deploying capital to where it matters most to bring innovation and technology at scale to have an impact. Impact is fundamental. I'll come back to that later, I suppose. Has changed dramatically. And in fact, if some of you can attend the Abu Dhabi Sustainable Finance Forum, this is just one of an example where you will see BNP Paribas contributing its own global international experience with two things. It was mentioned before on the prior panel, carbon credit, for example.
Yeah.
What is it about? Is it risky? Is it good? We believe it is good if it is done properly. And innovation, for example, innovation, we talk about carbon credit or respecting nature or harnessing to the power of nature. Mind you, we, bankers, we get a lot of interest for this because they matter most for us. Why? And I'll conclude on this. We think of the banking industry as an ability, a system, an industry which lends. But we always start our days at making sure that we understand risks of any nature. And climate change is the obvious elephant in any single boardroom. And by the way, in any family, and especially the family of the global south, climate change matters most. And this risk is very much an absolute driver for our strategy, which is now obviously in the air for what we call GTS 2025, growth, technology, and sustainability. You will see that it's not only about financing and profit, it's very much about social inclusion, yes.
Yeah.
Biodiversity, 4 billion. Social inclusion, 6 million individuals. Energy, renewable energy, and sustainable goals. That's a total of 350 billion by 2025 deployed in the economy. I mean, this is targeted. My word of conclusion is also simple. I think this is the responsibility of any single economic agent to mind its own business, her or his business. And I think we're just a private company, we're big, 200,000 individuals, 65 countries, yes. And it is a great responsibility for us because we matter for the economy in those countries. But we try to do good with the means and our role and purpose as a company and for the services that we deliver to satisfy the demand.
Thank you. There's a lot to think about there. And yes, you do have a fiduciary duty. You've got to think about risks. You've got your policies, and you were telling me this morning actually at breakfast about your restrictive policies, the CSR policies that are now in place, and I want to get through that in just a moment. But we have time. We've got 22 minutes, so we've got a lot of things to get through. But I want to go to you, Swapna, and it's not lost on me that you said that banking sector needs to think differently. I want you to give me a sense what your experience has been in terms of investing in these entrepreneurs. Do you feel that you're more flexible, open to understanding risks in a different way? Because, and I referred to this and I alluded to this when we started the conversation, we have billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars that have been put on the table through various conversations at COP, and very little of that has been deployed in the global south. That's a fact. And it all comes down to, when I speak to people, they say, got to de-risk projects. But risk is not all equal, and you know that coming from India. So give me an understanding.
Absolutely, you spoke my heart. I wish there was more money around to go for everyone to solve a climate problem. As we are putting it in words, it should also be in action. But I think not only, I think banking was just, it was just large corporates as an anecdotal example, but what we are seeing is for solving for climate, it takes a village. And when I say a village, what it really means is innovation. Well, that is very, very important for us to have that step function, that leap forward, which is where at Avana, when we're investing in startups, we find them as a great conduit to build that innovation and move the needle forward. But for a needle to move forward, it actually needs everyone to come together. And let me break it into 4 different parts, right? So innovation, great. Digital, technology, non-technology, it has to move each and every country forward. But what is needed is adopters. And early adopters actually are large corporates. So corporates actually work a lot with these startups for the GTM opportunities, for market linkages, for sandboxing, for thought process, ideation, process expertise, right? And you get all the large corporates to work with startups. The third key piece actually, honestly, is policy and regulatory. Each country has its own ecosystem to work with. Academia is coming forward. Now Stanford has a big climate school with John Doerr's blessings, and Colombia is doing a lot of good work in climate. In India particularly, if you came, say, 5 years back, anecdotally again, you'd possibly see no electric vehicles on the road. Today, when you come to the country, everyone is talking about electric vehicles. In 10 years, probably everyone will have an electric vehicle. And a lot of these transitions not only happen in regions like ours because startup ecosystem is innovating, but everyone from policy and regulatory and corporate is coming together to move the needle forward. And I think that's one way we at Avana are building the ecosystem, that well, we'll invest in the startups, but we'll be partners in their journey till they get to a scalable size where they actually could be possibly acquired.
Do you take on a lot more risk than a traditional bank, would you say?
Absolutely. And the reason is we are in a privileged position to do so because as a portfolio construction, we invest in about 20 to 25 companies in a fund's lifetime. And when you invest in these 20 to 25 companies, of course, some of them will be mistakes. Just like large corporates, research projects, some of them may not work. But imagine if 5 of them did work. Those were your North Stars. And one was something which was working on energy storage. It actually solves for the whole world's problem, which is thinking about energy storage. The second, think of it as a company which is actually building for food security. So today, the biggest problem that the planet is facing is temperatures are rising, floods are happening, droughts are happening, farmers is not knowing what to do, and every consumer right there, especially for countries like ours, which have 20% of the world population, how do I feed so many mouths? And if think of the movie Martian, if you had a planet where it was very hard, there was no arable land, there was no water, and you had food security systems, food production systems, which could produce food for everyone at market prices, that would be my North Star for a food company I invest in. Similarly, for supply chain and mobility. If there was a way to get everything off fossil fuels today, why not? But can we transition to there in next 10 to 15 years? And that's the North Star we are chasing as our investment philosophy. Can we get there faster, sooner with the help of technology?
It's about the speed. We are in code red, according to the UN. There's no time to waste. Jerome, you know, it's interesting. You work with big multinationals. I know some of your clients are also in industries that are considered dirty. But you also have a philosophy, and you've got regulation and policy now in place, where you're looking at companies and you're thinking about whether you want them as clients, whether you can advise them in terms of transition. And I'm curious to see, from your perspective, how that conversation has been evolving and how you're able to implement your new strategy.
You want me to tell the story of New York, right?
I would love that.
Okay,
Can everyone hear Jerome, by the way? Are you okay? It's a bit soft. Could you speak up?
yes.
Slightly.
Do you hear me better? Anyway, all right. No, I think that's fine. Okay. No, the story goes. It's easy to go to large corporations who are sustainability champions. I mean, I have a lot of names here. I mean, this is because we believe it's more sustainable and resilient for a bank to bank solid companies which takes climate change and the ESG agenda seriously, because they look further in the future. This is our business model. It's like our shareholders. Do we want hedge funds, our shareholders, speculators, our shareholders? No, we would prefer pension funds and institutional long-term committed investors that believe in our business model. So the anecdote that I can share with you is we had identified, when I was in New York, a very large company, very, very present in the US economy, almost everywhere. And this company had no sustainability strategy of any sort, and we are in 2018, right? It's fairly recent. And I asked permission to my management in New York, and I said, can I call them? I think it would be good if we can exchange. I would like to understand the thinking behind absent policy, absent strategy towards the climate agenda. It was 3 years after the Paris Agreement was signed. It was 2 years after the president at that time said no more Paris Agreement, but it was important for me to understand. I genuinely wanted to understand where they came from. And I call on the secretary of the board of this company and say, introduce myself, this is what we do. Europeans, yes, we know, but you have a different perspective. We do believe that the primary responsibility of any board and any corporation is to maximize the value of shareholders. So the big plan that I have to make a difference and an impact fall completely flat after 8 minutes of conversation.
Because by de facto, she says,
yeah,
that my mandate is to maximize profit for my shareholders, and that wasn't aligned with anything to do with CSR.
And by the way, BNP Paribas has a similar mandate. We have shareholders that we need to satisfy among a variety of different stakeholders. And at that point, I tell her, look, at this point of a difference on how your board and mine view the long-term development of the global economy, this is worth a lunch meeting with the CEO of the Bank for the Americas. Long story short, 6 months later, they hired their chief sustainability officer, and they no longer interact with the coal industry in particular. So if you've interacted with the American economy, the US economy, this done by a blue chip company is very much a breakthrough. I'm not saying that I have influenced anything, because frankly, at the board, they were hiring people to change the mindset of the company. But if it happened at this kind of company, there is very much hope.
And it's really illuminating, right? Because if we don't get the multinationals, the big guys, the private sector, to change from within and to change their thinking and philosophy, that is not going to whittle down to sort of the base level where we talk on the ground. And thank you for sharing that with us, Jerome. I appreciate that. Swapna, I want you to talk to me about some of the companies that, because I love this tech side of things, right? Because you're thinking technology and you're doing climate change. Something that you think can be scalable, and I'm going to be bold and say this, that's going to be the next Apple of India, for example, or a mega company that is going to change the way we view something in our supply chain, in our value chain.
Absolutely. So far we have invested in 20 companies. Of course, no favorite children, but I can name a few. So what we have essentially seen is, and goes back to your point, why do you have to really think about profit or planet? Why can't they coexist, right? You can build profitable startups which can actually serve the planet. And that's primarily our thesis when we are investing in these companies. And when we are investing in these companies, we are not even thinking local, that can this solve for India? But actually, can these companies be large enough to solve for the world? So let me take an example. A company which some of you may have heard of is a company called Terra.do. And again, for technology lovers, you may find this very interesting, is what they're essentially building is the future of LinkedIn Climate 2.0. So So today how we network, we are people from different walks of life networking, learning from each other. But Terra.do is actually building a LinkedIn for 100 million climate workers over next 10, 20 years. And the aspiration is climate is the next big problem statement. It happens to also be a big opportunity because it's a problem statement. Each and every individual that you're talking to now, be it entrepreneurs, regulators, corporate, everyone wants to solve for climate. Everyone wants to learn for climate. So this will be a venue where everyone can learn, network, mentor, find jobs, and build a new economy towards climate. And that's the ambition of the project of entrepreneurs building out of countries like ours for the world. And again, it's possible because unofficially we are the largest population in the world and we can hence have the best of the tech minds solving for world problems, right? And that is one example. I can pick one more if we have time, but those are the scale of technology problems that we're seeing entrepreneurs solve for.
I want to move on that, and we can talk about more examples as the conversation progresses. Jerome, I want to talk money. I want to talk about how you invest. I want to talk about how you measure risk. And again, because the knowledge and the context I have of where I come from, where, you know, the projects are either not big enough, they're not going to make, you know, they're not big enough in price tag. That means that excludes them from getting certain funding, whether the risk is too high. I mean, there's a plethora of issues. How do we solve this problem? And do you think that blended finance would be one way of looking at this? And how are you dealing with it when you're sitting at your table and you've got, you know, ideas and prospective investment opportunities, making decisions?
Blended finance, as in public money, meant to de-risk and catalyze the deployment of private capital. That's the definition that we have about blended finance. I will refer to the comments made 2 days ago by Noel Quinn, the CEO of HSBC. Yeah. We have a fairly similar business model with this large banking organization, and he thinks that it does not work well enough. I think there is more that should be done. The governance, the way this public money is deployed to really accelerate the mobilization of private capital is simply not at speed enough.
What is holding it back?
The misunderstanding of the word de-risking. Now, sometimes we feel in the banking industry that we are misunderstood. Yeah. But please appreciate that each time we arrive at our office in the morning, we have tens of very serious regulators on our back. Millions of clients who count on us, not today, not tomorrow, but in the foreseeable future, and that's decades in the future, that count on us not to make any mistake. And a mistake for a lender is not to lose a cent. So cost of risk is extremely important, but we are not giving up. And what you see today in the banking industry, and that applies, I mean, the best performers, I think, and that applies to BNP Paribas, naturally, is first, we adapt our product offering compared to 10 years ago. The way we engage with the private equity world is dramatically different. Not only we are way more closer to financial institutions specializing in private equity to help them and refinance them in the form of lending, for example. We have developed a number of investment capacities in the forms of fund that we contribute and seed with our own capital, and that's private equity. We're not in venture capital yet, but we are in private equity. So we do this in order to accelerate that. And given our status as reference bank of the Eurozone, we are also very close to central bank regulators and the European Union to help them to contribute. I mean, what we see in the market, what we believe is needed by the economy and the maintenance and the protection of the social fabric of what we have, not only in developed countries, but what the developing countries need wherever we can help them. We try and influence this. MDBs are everywhere. And I would like to end with a positive example. You know, we have closed last year a social bond together with another French bank in Morocco to finance a foundation, OCP Foundation, to finance a university. And it's a social bond because it is an investment in knowledge, in education. You were telling me yourself in your dear country where you lived so many years that you were surprised of the lack of awareness of most people in South Africa about the impact of maintaining an energy system which relies on coal.
Yeah.
And that's all about education. And we could make this social loan in Morocco because of the support of the World Bank under the MIGA program. So we're not giving up on blended finance. We're just saying that the blended finance is ripe for retooling, adapting its process in order really to support what we can offer the deployment.
So then, Jerome, I'm going to take a step back, and I thank you for your honesty. And truly, it's illuminating speaking to you and understanding the complexities in which you're plugged into. It's not easy being a banker, actually. Clearly. But listen, then when we're sitting in Code Red and we're urgently needing funding specifically to help vulnerable communities transition, and the money isn't there because it's too risky or, as you say, it's too complex, what then? What's the solution? How do we manage this? Jerome, do you want to tell me?
Okay.
Yeah, and then we'll come to you.
So you appreciate that where the bank that I represent makes the most of an impact is through a balance sheet which is the size of the GDP of the G7 country.
Yeah.
That's 2.6 trillion euros in total size. So this is very much through our services. Our services are deployed, whatever they are, in accordance with our sustainability strategy, with our CSR policies. That's fundamental to understand. That's a very powerful governance characteristic of BNP Paribas. Now, when the last mile is needed, and that's philanthropy, that's where we step in. And philanthropy is not only deploying in partnership with those NPOs, non-profit organizations, who know how to integrate and welcome refugees in Europe, in different countries, for example. We spent 17 million to help this. We don't advertise maybe well enough. Under our GTS 2025 strategy that I mentioned earlier, we have committed 200 million euros in philanthropic money. That's donation.
But this is philanthropy, right? I mean, in terms of climate agenda, there's a gap.
Okay.
You admit that, right?
Oh, so you want to be specific?
Yeah, I want to be specific on this because I think...
one aspect of blended finance that we don't speak about well enough, and that applies to Africa in particular, is credit insurance, which support export finance. If you think of export finance, you have many clients in our portfolio who make the electrification and access to electricity to those countries possible. And the technology is, not only the technology, but also the ability to build those plants. The solar power plant, for example, in a country in Africa, which will power a local community. This we finance.
And it's a great example. A lot more needs to be done. Swapna, I want you to bring you in here because we've got a lot to sort of talk over. You are seeing in real time, in real terms, what entrepreneurs need, the ideas that they have, the need to get it from conception to implementation, and the money that is required, and the challenges, right? And this is probably why you are a partner at Havana Capital, because these are the entrepreneurs that couldn't plug into a traditional system. So I want you to break it down for me on what kind of impact you're able to make with these entrepreneurs that will eventually be scalable enough, have been de-risked enough to then eventually go for traditional financing.
Absolutely. So I think every company is a startup before it becomes a large company, and they go through this journey of 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and 10 to 100. Typically, wherein we step in is that 0 to 1 journey, where it's risky. It may fail. If it does work, it will create a huge impact on India, in world in general, and we should step in and put that money. So that's why we have a portfolio. We invest in multiple companies.
Is it high risk, high return scenario?
It's absolutely high risk, high return. Every company that we invest in, our expectation is that when we exit that company, we are able to return all the money to the LPs back. LPs are basically, for terminology, are people who invest money with us. And this is where we put money where our mouth is. So this is basically all our years of hard work and labor. People have given us their money and trusted us to multiply it, as well as create meaningful impact on the ground, which means we have to be very, very discerning in finding these entrepreneurs who can actually create real impact and real profits in the long term. But what I've also seen is that 0 to 1 journey is where we come in. Actually, 1 to 10 is where we start seeing different pockets of capital come in, which is where blended finance comes in, debt comes in, working capital comes in. Over time, when they get to 10 to 100 journey, large strategics and corporates come in and start putting their own money because it becomes more real. And over time, when it becomes a large company, it gets listed and the public money comes in.
How is the appetite for this? Is it growing?
I think it's improving. When I joined the industry in India, frankly, 10 years back, you had 0 unicorns. Unicorns is just to show the scale of the economy. Now there are 100 plus, which means the economy has really exploded. Entrepreneurs have proven and large companies have been created, which means now there's enough global capital coming to India and investing in these. So I'm actually on the positive side, where I do believe that climate finance is real, and over time, people will start putting their money where their mouth is because they will start seeing real impact on the ground and real returns.
Okay, tell me about the returns. What are the margins? What are the returns? Are we talking double digits?
Of course, why not?
Of course.
Why can't you create an Amazon of climate? Why can't you create a Uber of climate? Why can't you create a Pinterest of climate? I mean, every company possibly, and these are just to show the scale, but any large technology company can be created in climate. And I'm not saying it, go look up at Warren Buffett, Larry Fink, Bill Gates. Everyone says next 1,000 unicorns will be climate tech. And that's the reason we are doing what we're doing.
Do you feel you have one of those in your portfolio?
Already.
Havana Capital, we should definitely take a look at what you're up to. But we have to delineate between the entrepreneurs, right, which are interesting startups, getting into the ecosystem, versus the big mega projects that are going to help with energy transition and that are going to have a significant impact on the climate's agenda. So we're running out of time. I can't believe we're running out of time. I want you to very quickly give me a sense on how we're doing in that space, Jerome.
Two examples very quickly. At the time, the largest single solar power plant in the world, in Abu Dhabi, we were financing it, and that's Weihan solar power plant, PV2. The other example is that I can tell you that we follow extremely closely the green hydrogen story and the infrastructure that are going to emerge in this very region in the Gulf countries, and we will be part of this financing, infrastructure financing.
Fantastic. So it's big mega projects, yeah? Swapna. I want you to give me a sense of what you think is going to be making a huge impact, specifically in energy transition. India relies on coal.
So I think for me, if storage is a problem we can solve, I think we have half the job done. I think every nation is moving towards their renewable targets. We as a country, we have the target of by 2030 get to 50% renewable. There's enough infrastructure being deployed. I think we still don't know how to get the storage, and there are a lot of technologies being worked on. And if I had a magic wand, honestly, I would just solve the storage problem as of today.
You don't have a magic wand?
I wish I
had. Come on. Okay. And to you, Jerome, you've been a supporter of the Zayed Sustainability Prize, specifically the Beyond 2020 initiative. How are you assessing the impact of the prize and your support of the prize?
That's probably the best part of our partnership with the prize. And this is something that we had discussed extensively with the team at the prize, Dalal, Ali, Sharifa. They may have considered as obsessed because we were insisting so much on impact measurement, disclosure, numbers, etc. And suffice to say, I'm going to take this example. Since 2013, the prize, and we were not even this, but that counts, that does matter. Since 2013, 46 high schools, global schools, have been funded by the prize. 7.2 megawatt of clean energy have been produced. 5.7 ton of CO2 equivalent have been removed, and 427-something thousand individuals have been positively impacted by the deployment of the prize money. This is impact. This matters for us. And at the end of the day, we try to be as much as possible everywhere to make an impact and different through our product and services. But when it comes to philanthropy, we believe at some point that the prize could make a difference, that we could not because we did not have the access, and we did not see the perspective that they had from this part of the world.
It seems like everyone in the value chain has a role. This is why I like numbers, because you can measure your success based on what the figures are showing you. Look, we're heading to COP28. We know that a lot of commitment's going to come to the table, and I hope the next time we have this conversation, the gap would have gotten smaller, the banks would have perhaps re-rated some risk, and the next time we speak to you, maybe your companies are okay, fantastic. Well, we'll see you soon. Thank you, Swapna. Thank you, Jerome. Much appreciated for your time. A round of applause.
Thank you to Eleni and to our, of course, our esteemed speakers. Well, I hope you all agree with me that it is crucial that the young people are engaged, that they are empowered to create solutions to some of the greatest climate challenges, greatest climate issues that we are facing today. That's why I'm now delighted to introduce two of our youngest speakers that we have with us today, two former students from high schools that received the Zayed Energy Prize. Today, Toby and Jacqueline will share their thoughts and experiences on how the prize provides a platform for empowering youth to accelerate impact in their communities through social innovation. And so, without further ado, I'd like to invite up Toby Thorpe, Deputy Mayor, Huon Valley, Tasmania. Toby, please come to the stage.
Hi everybody. First off, thank you for having me here today. My name's Toby. I'm from the land of the Malakadi people in the Southeast Indigenous tribes of Tasmania in Australia. And in 2017, my school won the Zayed Sustainability Prize. So it's great to be back in Abu Dhabi here for Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week. I've been on a journey for the last 6 years that was ignited from a passion and empowerment to learn about sustainability and take action. But with every journey, there are lessons to learn. And I wanted to share 3 of my biggest lessons and a little bit about my journey since winning the Zayed Sustainability Prize and running a project in my school. Coming here to Abu Dhabi was the first time I had been exposed to what sustainability and climate change actually meant to the lives of people. I live in a community surrounded by some of the most pristine landscapes that you can come across. Being here in Abu Dhabi, meeting people, connecting with people, seeing what people were doing to have an impact on the world, it was incredibly empowering. But understanding what that meant in my backyard, back at home, was really challenging until I got back on the plane, flew back to Tasmania to a community facing wildfires, to an evacuation centre. That's what climate change is in my backyard. So leading a project at my school, shifting the narrative on what sustainability means, was my core focus, and we did that, made possible by the ZSP. But my journey went far further when I left school. Moved out of home, my parents really excited that I was going to move down the street until I told them I was going to Bali, Indonesia, where I went there to challenge myself and work with young people to help them build solutions to the world's biggest problems as well. Use the privilege that I have to empower a generation. And that's where my first lesson was made that I wanted to share with you today. And it's that sustainability is not just our challenge, but our greatest opportunity, and probably my generation having the first opportunity to change the world with solutions. That's the power of making an impact on the world. So I worked through Southeast Asia. I learned how to cook rice for the first time. I did all these things. And I was feeling incredibly disconnected to my generation back at home and wanting to make an impact back home in a local community, because that's incredibly important as well. So I went back home. I spent time working with my teachers, with my family, with my colleagues. I went to my first COP, questioning how COP24 had existed for longer than I'd been alive, talks about climate change. And then I went back home and I started the biggest project that I've ever worked on, the Climate Leaders Program, which was from the passion of connecting with one another and feeling disconnected, is what if there's other young people that also feel this way too? So I started the Climate Leaders Program, which now annually engages thousands of students across Australia and the world in building solutions, empowerment, and igniting their interests to work in their local communities. A ripple effect from what happened here. And to date, we've worked with over 80,000 young people directly, and I'm incredibly proud of that. That's my second lesson, is that the power of connection and the importance of talking about empathy is underrated. We can't progress, we can't work together, and we can't make sure that sustainability continues to make important impacts on people's lives in countries all around the world unless we talk about empathy and connection. So after this big journey, I went to my second COP, I traveled a little bit, I went to university, I did all these things that a normal 18, 19-year-old did. I then went back home again to the Huon Valley, a rural community in the very far south of Australia, and I decided that maybe I should do something crazy again. Just in November, on my 21st birthday, I was sworn in as Deputy Mayor of the Huon Valley, the youngest Deputy Mayor in Tasmanian history and one of the youngest elected representatives in all of Australia. And something that I'm taking from Abu Dhabi Sustainability Week is a comment that Dr. Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber said during the opening ceremony, is that next never stops. I don't know where next is for me, but I know next week I'm moving my first climate motion as an elected representative to ensure that my local community can be at the forefront of leading sustainable solutions, in stating that climate change and sustainability be core business of our municipality, and hopefully continue to inspire a generation of leaders, continue the ripple effect that the legacy of Sheikh Zayed has had on me throughout all of Tasmania and Australia. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Toby, for sharing those personal reflections, of course, those lessons. We'd now like to welcome our second speaker in Voices of Youth, Jacqueline Wambua, student at Stanford University. Jacqueline, come to the stage. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Hi everyone, my name is Jacqueline Wambua. I'm a current student at Stanford University studying economics and political science. My school, which is Tarehe Girls Center, won the prize back in 2017. And our main purpose was actually reducing electricity cost in the school, and the money that was going to be saved would be used to enroll more needy but bright girls into the institution. So when we won the prize, and I saw more girls being admitted in the school, it was a moment of, aha, actually, I am the answer to many generational prayers, because I saw many girls being able to access education and even breaking the cycle of poverty, as most of us want to unleash our full potential. The prize has really been key to my educational journey. One, it has taught me the power of a transformative education. The answer is we are only on earth for too long. And so, with this time that we are here on earth, we better create this transformative change for the next generations that are there to come. And the second thing that this prize has taught me is human connections and centering every human in every solution that we make. Today, the song from every leader and most speakers that have been on this forum has been, we need to listen to the communities. We need to go to the grassroots and listen to the communities. And we all came here, and as we came into this room, we were welcomed by this awesome exhibition right there. And in these pictures, we see communities that have been impacted by the prize. We see how agriculture has transformed lives. But the question is, where are these communities in the room? How can we transform the conversations from the panels, the conversations from the recommendations that most speakers have, to having, actually, what does it mean to having a community? There's this word that I like in Zulu that is called sawabona. Sawabona means, I see you, I value you, and I am here. We are leaders, we are educated, We as young people, we're the future leaders of tomorrow, and actually right now, we are making change where we are. But even as we go into these communities, even as we formulate solutions, we need to practice seeing each other. We need to recognize the voices on the table and those that are not on the table. And we need to invite the voices that are not on the table into the table. Because if we don't do all that, we will keep on recommending, and climate change is running faster than we can. So, even now, as a young leader, as I do sustainable projects in Kenya, really to help gender-based violence survivors, to create frameworks for them to be integrated into the community, and for them to be empowered, not problem solved. Because I really realized that the prize empowered me to be whom I am today. It did not problem solve. It gave me the tools to become who I am today. And so, thank you. As we go into this, it's a matter of realizing that the heroes are back at home, the heroes and the communities. And what we need to do as leaders, as much as we're educated, as much as we have all these ideas, for these ideas to become tangible as young leaders, we need to listen. Listening for what we can hear and what we cannot hear. And I know this requires a lot of humility, but it's a time we embrace Sawabona. It's a time we see each other. It's a time we listen to each other, even in these platforms. Because if you don't do that, it will be a room full of brilliant ideas that everyone is competing for theirs to be heard. So, we as young leaders, and with this prize and many other opportunities to make change out there, the leaders, the change makers of tomorrow are not in the history. They are not the ones we see on big televisions. We are here. We are the heroes of the home. We are the heroes here. And I encourage all of us to practice Sawabona, to listen, to see each other, to see those communities even at the table that we are, because there is where change from the grassroots, and that is only how we can transform these brilliant ideas as young people to become tangible solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, of course, to Toby and to Jacqueline. What wonderful, stirring, inspiring remarks they shared with us. It was really great to hear your passion, your experiences. I feel like the future's in good hands with you guys. So thank you very much for coming and sharing with us today. We now move on to our final session of the day, where we'll be discussing impact through innovation. Let's take a look.
To achieve UN SDG targets and leave no one behind, it is essential to close inequality gaps. How do we improve economic outcomes for all? Deploying sustainable solutions in the most remote communities brings residents improved livelihoods, economic prosperity, higher standards of living. Building resilient and inclusive communities ensures a brighter future for everyone.
We would now like to welcome Jim Stenman back to the stage, and joining him are our esteemed panel of Nicole Isepi, Managing Director for Global Energy Innovation, Bezos Earth Fund, David Pong, CEO of Waterome, and Guillermo Pepe, Founder and CEO of Mamotest. Please join me in giving all our panelists and Jim a warm welcome.
Thank you, everyone. So this session is called Impact Through Innovation, and we're going to highlight how organizations, both small and large, are coming together to provide sustainable solutions to communities around the world that are in need. Being joined by Nicole Isepi, Managing Director of Global Energy Innovation at the Bezos Earth Fund, and David Pong, CEO of Waterome, and Guillermo Pepe, founder and CEO of Mamotest. Very excited to have you here today. You're all making quite the impact when it comes to innovation across different scales. I'd like to start with you, Nicole. I know that the Bezos Fund is a new philanthropy, and you're in the early stages of operation, and I believe there's some 10 billion that's been allocated and going to be spent leading up to 2030, I believe. What are some of the initiatives that you're most excited about?
Yes, certainly, and maybe just a little bit of an introduction because we are fairly new. So Jeff Bezos set up the Bezos Earth Fund in the belief, and so is all us as directors of the fund, that this year is a decisive decade. We really need to accelerate the transition of both energy and the industry in terms of achieving our targets. And so in light of that, Jeff has given $10 billion as an initial endowment, 100% grant, hence not expecting any returns, to really look at what are the issues that are slowing down that acceleration. Where are the gaps, where are the barriers, and how can we, particularly in philanthropy, be a co-partner in the industry to help with that acceleration? But in terms of technology innovation and that, there's always such amazing things, but it is no secret. The speed and scale of the acceleration, both in energy and industry, is not going at the pace we need to. So there's some great technology innovation, and I would say sort of at a macro level, it falls into like two categories. One in this decade is further advancement of the existing solutions we see to optimise the efficiency and performance of them. And the second is the new technology. The new things dealing with the gaps and the issues that we really don't have any solution or sufficient solution as of today. And they're exciting for this decade. So you'll see things like advancements for the solar, the wind, the floating offshore wind with wind islands. You'll see carbon capture, which has to be part of this discussion as well. You'll see advancements in terms of software for managing grids, as well as making sure you've got 24/7 renewable and tracking that sufficiently. You've also got e-fuels and synthetic fuels. We're very excited about it, the Bezos Earth Fund, including hydrogen. And obviously the decarbonisation of hard-to-abate industry, so green steel, green cement and shipping. You will see that being advanced through technology innovation this decade. But there's one particular thing I have to say both the Bezos Earth Fund and myself personally is very excited about. And that is looking at technology as a way to solve multi-industry or multi-issues. And so basically looking at technology that can solve various issues at the one time. So let me give you an illustration of what my thoughts are. For example, agriculture. Agriculture leads to about 23% of global emissions. 50% of land around the world is used for some form of food production. However, this is not being addressed at the sufficient level that it needs to. So what we're very excited about is how can we look at this, particularly in the food and agriculture industry, and look at it through the eyes of climate and renewables. IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, has just recently launched a new program called Renewables for Adaptation, for improving livelihoods. And one of those pillars is on agriculture. So it's about looking at, for example, net zero farming machinery, biofertilizers, looking at technology that is addressing multiple issues to try and address with that acceleration of how we can move this transition further at a quicker speed.
And is it challenging to bring those technologies to developing countries in particular?
Well, before I answer that, there's actually a first step, and I think it's a step that needs some addressing. And that is that there's a real challenge. There's some amazing startups, amazing entrepreneurs, amazing ideas, but how do we catalyse that to market scale? And that is something at the Bezos Earth Fund, we, with various people in the industry, we're looking to work together and discuss and find better solutions of how we can get it to scale. But to your specific question about Africa, yes, it is true. And that's something that we are also, through some of our initiatives, such as GAP, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, which was something we launched just recently as co-partner with both Rockefeller as well as IKEA Foundation, is really looking at how we can help that, particularly in the developing countries, such as Africa and Southeast Asia.
Brilliant. David, I'd like to turn to you very quickly. I know that your journey started some 10 years ago in terms of what you're doing today, and it really showcases how technology can be life-changing Can you take us back and just share your evolution over the past decade?
Yeah, sure, I would love to. So just an introduction, what we do at Waterroom is we are tackling the global water crisis where 2 billion people are facing the need to be forced to drink contaminated water from surface water sources. And oftentimes this leads to waterborne diseases like diarrhea, dysentery, and even premature death. So having realized this about 8 years ago, as I was about to graduate from university, I felt that this was so important for us to tackle. Otherwise, we're continuing to go on without resolving this situation for 2 billion people, which is almost 1/4 of the world, without leaving them behind while the rest of the world progresses. So together with my co-founders, we started Waterroom with the intention to develop water filtration systems that are decentralized, that are portable, easy to be deployed, simple to use and simple to set up, and even can be independent from electricity. So we went on a journey to find what is the real design that would be effective out there in communities. I think one of the first few mistakes that we made were we brought a lot of assumptions to the table. We went to communities in our neighboring region. I'm based in Singapore, but in Singapore we don't have this issue of the lack of safe water, but in our neighboring region there are a lot of countries that do face this condition. So we would go to these communities and we would spend time trying to understand the problem, but perhaps we didn't understand the problem deep enough. So we would take a 2-week trip, 3-week trip, and then immediately come back, start to do something in the laboratory, start to design something, and bring it down the next time. So we started off with big systems, complicated systems with a lot of tubings, hose, and all that jutting out of the system. And we brought it down, and we expected the locals to use it. We'll teach them a 10-step process, and even print out the piece of paper and stick it there, and expecting them that they can read it. But unfortunately, this is not the case. Innovation always requires adoption in order to be applicable in the long term for its sustainable usage. So we found that eventually it was just obsolete because the people didn't understand how to utilize it. They were just found it too complex and figured that this was not worth the time to continue. And therefore, our first 20 prototypes ended up like this. Each time we went down on the ground, we tried something, it just wasn't adopted, and we had to go back to the drawing board.
And how much time did you waste on coming in with your own assumptions? And at what point did you realize that you had to almost unlearn what you expected to be the case and then just open and listen to the communities?
I think it was the first 6 months of going down and just trying something new without actively listening. And 6 months later, we realized listening and having empathy, as many of the speakers have been talking about, that's very key. And so when we switched that approach, our trips down were no longer about thinking about how should I solve this, but it's about sitting down, spending time, listening to what the local women have to say, because usually the women are the ones in charge of finding safe drinking water for the family. And we would spend time talking to them and even just looking and observing, witnessing how do they go about their day-to-day lives. So it wasn't until we did that the aha moment came when we saw somebody pumping his bicycle with a bicycle pump. And we got inspired from that because it was so intuitive. It was an action that was universally understood. And so we were inspired from that to create our flagship product today, which is a bicycle pump-inspired water filtration system.
Excellent. And where are you with the product now?
We're thankful that we have been able to bring our product to more than 40 different countries, serve 250,000 people in developing regions, disaster-hit regions, including some of the refugee situations and humanitarian crisis situation like the Ukraine war currently.
Well done.
And is it people that are experiencing conflict? Would you say that that's an area where you feel that the company has had the biggest impact?
I would say that's 50%, 50%. 50% for rural and remote communities. And that's really why we name ourselves Water Roam, because we wanted to bring safe drinking water to be roamed around the world. So remote communities, hard-to-reach communities are 50% of our portfolio. Another 50% are disaster-hit regions affected by floods or humanitarian situations.
And just broadly speaking, I think a lot of people will be surprised that water access remains such a big challenge in 2023. What are your reflections on that?
I think you're absolutely right. Like, with so much progress, now we're talking about AI and ChatGPT, and so much has already been progressing with the rest of the world. Why is it that this problem is still quite prevalent? I think it has to do with the political view. Sometimes it's not as high for the issue of water. Priority tends to be more on other sectors rather than water. And because maybe these communities are so remote, so rural, it's really hard to take existing solutions that are working for the rest of the developed world to be applied. So there isn't a lack of solutions. There are many solutions out there. But the issue is, can we take the same solutions to be applied in such locations that are hard to reach? Not really. We have to find new ways to solve challenges in these developing communities.
And what surprised you the most throughout this journey that you've been on?
I think what surprises us is that we really have to, like what I was saying is listen and having so much empathy for local people. Without that, we just can't progress. Without that, we are making too much assumptions on the ground, and we're not progressing in our development of innovation. So innovation must really come with a heart that we are there to understand and journey with them through the long run. It's a marathon. We find that social enterprise is a marathon.
Excellent, thank you. Jim, I'm quite interested in learning more about Mamotest and the experience that you had in terms of taking it to the market, because you are having an incredible impact on the health of women in particular.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it was a long journey. We are drastically reducing breast cancer mortality in Latin America. We started about 9 years ago, and it all started in a conversation with my father. My father is a medical doctor specializing on breast imaging diagnosis. He told me he was frustrated because women were arriving late to his office. So he wasn't able to save their lives, and he was a doctor for 50 years, and he was just telling them that they were going to die. So that really caught my attention, and I decided to start doing a research on why women weren't able to have early diagnosis. Before that, I was living in Europe for 10, 12 years. So for me, it was something like really normal to get access to healthcare. But I found out that it wasn't in developing economies. So I decided to do that research. I found out that there were so many barriers that were distancing women from having access to early diagnosis. If women have access to early diagnosis, 98% of them would save their lives. And we're talking about breast cancer. Breast cancer is the #1 cancer in the world. 700,000 women die every year because of breast cancer. 70% of those deaths are in developing economies. So we found out there were mainly 4 barriers. There were lack of technology, disease infrastructure, lack of mammography units in the territory, lack of medical doctors. Usually medical doctors, specialized medical doctors, are in big cities, so the rest of the country lack that kind of medical doctors. Lack of education. Maybe women don't know that they have to go for a mammogram yearly once they are 4 years old. And of course, lack of legislation that encourage women to go for a mammogram, right? So taking into account that landscape, we started developing a telemedicine solution. So, and we thought that was going to be the solution, right? In the beginning. We started connecting mammography units to medical doctors in big cities, so they would do the interpretation in less than 24 hours, instead of maybe 6 to 9 months that was taking at the time for a woman to go from trying to do a mammogram to really having a diagnosis. We, as I said in the beginning, we thought that was the solution, and we we were okay with that. But then we found out that that was only the beginning of the. We were just seeing the tip of the iceberg of the problem, and there were so many other problems that we needed to solve. We thought because we were a small company, we didn't have to do it. Like government should do it, maybe big companies should do it, but then we realized that no one was really taking care of that, of the rest of the problem. And that the problems were that women would come back with a diagnosis and ask us, what do I do with this? Now I know that I may have breast cancer, but I need to do some extra medical tests like breast ultrasound, biopsies, visit an oncologist, get a treatment, and I'm not able to do that. So we were really like worried about how could we solve that, because we were just opening a door, and they weren't able to get to a treatment on time. So we were in the same situation.
Does that relate to what David said in terms of entering with a bunch of assumptions because
Exactly.
you're not living in those communities?
Exactly. So that is when we really understood the whole picture. We started developing technology in order to follow up those women, not just giving them the diagnosis, but following them up until they get the treatment and they end the treatment successfully. And that platform allows us to have 100% traceability of those women, and really not just giving them diagnosis, but knowing that they are going to be alive, right? Saving lives, actually. That took us 9 years, to get there. And this is why I always think that technology is key, is important, but it's only part of the equation, right? We need to really understand the problem. Many times when I speak with startups, entrepreneurs, even companies in the developed world, like in Europe, in the US, they would say, yeah, I have this technology that is going to be breakthrough technology and it's going to revolutionize healthcare and it's going to solve everything. And I always say, how are you going to get with your AI solution, for example, to people in developing countries? And they're like, what do you mean? Like, they are connected, right? No, they are not connected. So we got to get there. So technology, as I said, is part of the equation, but then you have to know how to implement it. I always say that technology is here, but it's not evenly distributed yet. So we have to see a way to distribute it and to democratize access to quality health care.
And a lot of those people that are lucky enough to be on mobile devices, they don't necessarily have access to enough data. And that creates a big challenge, I think.
Totally. Data, it's key. Actually, there is an inflection point, right? It's 2020, the pandemic, COVID. Until the pandemic, healthcare was really behind every other industry in terms of acquiring and using technology and getting the data, the evidence, in order to develop drugs, medical equipment, and treatments. With the pandemic, there was a huge inflection point, and healthcare started to acquire and implement that technology and to use that data. Right now, the healthcare is it's heading towards evidence-based medicine, which is going to change the medicine as we know, the healthcare as we know it. Until now, it's been a sick care, I call it, because we call it healthcare, but what is the system is waiting for you to get ill in order to take care of you, and that's very efficient, and we lose so many lives in the process. Right now, we are in this transition to using data in the way we have to use it, smart, in order to improve the design and development of drugs, of medical equipment, and of course, of treatment. And we can, as I said before, we can follow patients throughout the entire patient journey, and that allows us to save lives.
Nicole, your big boss is one of the wealthiest men on the planet, and I think we really have to applaud these efforts through the Bezos Fund. I'm wondering, what does success look like in 2023? and leading up to 2030?
Yes, certainly. So we're very excited, the Bezos Earth Fund, and I think philanthropy in general is such a special time for us to be part of the discussion for climate change and addressing the energy and industry transition. So for this year, and particularly with COP being hosted here in the UAE, we're very excited to be part of, with the public and private sector, collaborating together to be part of that solution and the acceleration of actually the execution. Not the including the discussion, but more than the discussion. We've really got to all step up together. But this year, there's lots of things to be excited about. We made a commitment just earlier of $3 billion just focused on nature, which is focused on conservation, reforestation, as well as food systems. So we'll be looking to execute more of that and sort of issue more grants in that area. We're also very proud of our Systems Change Lab. This is a project we do with the World Resource Institute. It tracks 50 transitions that must be executed in this decade. And it also tracks them where the tipping points are. The data is freely available, so I do highly recommend you and your colleagues to have a look at this. But what we're very excited about is we've only just launched it last year. We're going to continue it this year, and we're very happy to offer it as a source for this year in lead up to the COP as well. But in addition to that, it's not just looking at the data and doing the analysis. It's about us with our partners, both public and private sector. Where are the solutions? How do we take it to this next step and actually get some real executions through pilots and really sort of market to scale solutions? The other thing is obviously with our other initiatives like GAP that I mentioned earlier, the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. We're very excited about that. That's unique. It's philanthropy, so it's us, Rockefeller and IKEA Foundation coming together and creating an alliance. And this is that special element of what GAP has. It's an alliance with many MLAs around the world. It's got IFCs, World Bank, ADB. It's got 25 and it's growing. It's got experts such as IRENA, International Solar Alliance, RMI. It's coming together and really thinking about how do we change the business models and how do we get more execution through innovation, especially addressing the developing worlds through metro grids, distributed renewable energy. How do we reduce that cost of renewables to Africa so they can increase their development? But also, you may have heard, we launched it in Sharm last year, and we've just had an announcement 2 days ago, is about our ETA program, which is the Energy Transition Accelerator. It's an initiative that the Bezos Earth Fund is very proud to be part of with the Rockefeller, as well as the US State Department. And it's actually really tapping into the private capital to really find a way to really activate carbon markets as a way to support the financing to accelerate that. So just yesterday we have announced, and it's public information, a global expert committee to help us design this. And we'll be working very hard this year on the design of it with the aim that come to, close or around the time of COP, we'll be announcing that to really sort of launch that as another tool for the industry.
Excellent. Guillermo and David, one question for both of you. I think there's this perception, and it's not necessarily something I agree with, but there is a perception that impact-driven businesses are often considered just social and not necessarily a real business in a sense. This is obviously something that the two of you disagree with, but do you have any reflections on that perception?
Oh, sure. And it is like that. Actually, that's what many people think. In the beginning of our journey, I remember people asking me, what you doing with your NGO? I was like, no, this is a company. This is not an NGO. I mean, we have a purpose. We want to save lives, and we also have a business. And it was hard to explain that to people in the beginning. I mean, I'm speaking about 10 years ago. Right now, it's more understandable. I mean, people start to see it more clearly with what's a social impact company is. And sometimes, what I usually think about that is that even if in the future social impact are going to be all the companies, in my opinion, it's going to be a must for a company to be social impact, to have social impact. Today we are in a transition where we, or at least we at Mamotest, when we are raising money, for example, we feel that we have a lot more pressure, more things to prove. Not that it's just a business, but that it's also having a social impact. And sometimes, you know, when I'm speaking to funds, after the business due diligence, I go like, okay, now you have to do a social impact due diligence, but okay, but that is what we do, you know. I mean, this is business as usual for us. It's not something that that we don't know how to do, or we can measure that on a daily basis, and we can show you what we've done. But
just quickly on that as well, is there a friction? How do you navigate the friction between saving lives and running a business? Because you have to navigate both of them.
Yeah. For us, it's natural. That's what I'm trying to explain here. For us, it's very natural because we were born with that purpose of saving lives, and then we started to look, how do we do this sustainably, financially? So then it became a business. So what we do, it's always, with everything we do, it's always with having in mind that we want to save as many lives as possible, and it also has to be a business to attract funds in order to keep growing and scaling and reaching more and more women globally.
And David, is that something you recognize, the same narrative?
Yeah, definitely. I fully agree and echo what Guillermo said. We're always finding that it's a challenge, that sometimes there's a preconceived notion about how social impact or social enterprises may not be as professional as a usual commercial entity. And this is something that we have built into our value system to tackle. We have 3 values that are in our company, one of which that we tackle this is to ensure that we have excellence in our delivery, because we want to show that even though we are a social enterprise, even though that many of my team, I would like to say that I feel like I look young, but many of my team are actually younger. Majority are just out of university and in the range of late 20s. So we may look like we're not professional, but we have to show through our work and through our ethos and how we do things that, and in the end, we are committed to delivering excellence. And so that's why we built this into our value system, and we aim to tackle this preconceived notion that we're not professional.
And you're obviously having a significant impact as well. You both have won prizes here at the Zayed Sustainability Awards. What advice can you offer the next generation that's also looking to have a social impact through their businesses? Both of you.
Okay. Well, I'm very, sometimes I kind of envy, you know, the next generation, because they are going to start with this environment of awareness of what social impact is, and the need for companies or for businesses to solve the biggest problems, the biggest social problems there are. So sometimes when I think about that, I say, oh, I would love to have had that opportunity of starting a business with this kind of environment where you can have these kind of events and meet people that speak your language in some way, because they all understand what you are talking about. So I would say just seize the opportunity, take this opportunity, be a missionary, not a mercenary. Go for a mission, go for a purpose in life, and you can also, you know, make money by solving the biggest social problems in the world. So yeah, take that opportunity.
And David, final word.
Yeah, for me, I think it's don't afraid to start, because if you have that passion will allow you to keep persevering through the challenges, even though You may not be heard from the beginning, but if you keep speaking out, keep voicing it up, I think we shouldn't underestimate the power of our voices and our collective voices. There will be unity eventually when you find that common platform for many of those that are coming together to voice out your opinions on what the area that you're challenged and you're trying to tackle. Eventually, there will be community that comes together to support each other. So I think it's important not to be afraid to start.
Brilliant, and congratulations on both of you for winning those awards. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks for having us, and Nicole, thanks for being with us as well.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Jim, and of course, thank you to all of our moderators, all of our speakers, all of our fantastic panelists here today. I also want to extend our thanks to you, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, for taking the time out of your days to be with us here, to hear all the varying perspectives on some of the greatest challenges, some of the greatest climate challenges facing our planet. Today's discussions, I believe, have made it clear that all stakeholders have a role to play in delivering inclusive, sustainable development and humanitarian action. But I also hope that you'll agree that thanks to the work of many leading organizations, passionate sustainability advocates, that the future does in fact look bright. Thank you all once again. Have a lovely afternoon. Enjoy your lunches. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.